So, X-Men 97 is almost done with its first season, and I genuinely can't stop thinking about it. The action is insane, I'm obsessed with the animation style, it basically fixed Cyclops' reputation overnight. I love how it adapts lesser-known stories from the comics and leans into the personal drama that made them so special, and the way that this revival of a 30-year-old Saturday morning cartoon is able to be a mature and nuanced look into bigotry and hate and tell some of the best X-Men stories of all time. And so it's gotten me thinking, what other shows could get the same treatment? What animated shows were canceled before their time that could maybe benefit from more modern animation and a more mature approach to storytelling? The superhero genre alone is ripe with series that were canceled after just a couple seasons because of studio meddling or rights issues, a lot of which ended on cliffhangers that haven't been able to be resolved decades later. Animated reboots can be 50-50. Usually they lead to some kind of disappointment, but with X-Men 97, it's gotten me excited about the prospect of some of these shows being able to make a return. And so these are some animated series that I think deserve the X-Men 97 treatment. Listen, that Invincible video did way better than I thought it would, and I'm just trying to recapture some of that magic. This video is brought to you by Raycon. Raycon's wireless earbuds have sound quality that is on par with the big audio brands, but at only half the price. And now with their new upgraded everyday earbuds, they've gotten even better. Like the previous model, these earbuds have tap functionality for play pause and your voice assistant, customizable sound profiles, and an awareness mode. But now with their newest model, they've added multi-point connectivity, IP66 sweat resistance, and active noise cancellation. And with 32 hours of battery life, including wireless charging and quick charging, you can blast that X-Men 97 theme for as long as you need to. The IP66 dust and water resistance mean that if you accidentally leave them in your pocket, they can go through a load of laundry and it's no problem. I don't want to talk about it, but I have done that before many times because I'm a very dumb person, and I'm very grateful that technology has now evolved to account for my dumbness. And not to mention that they come in a variety of different colors and even have these protective cases so you can protect and customize them even more. Seriously, having active noise cancellation earbuds has been a total game changer for me. I'm someone who gets pretty easily overstimulated, especially out in public, and so having the ability to easily tune out noises and distractions has been super helpful. Especially when you turn on some white noise or something, I've literally been able to sleep through construction that was happening outside my door. It's great, it's the best, I'm telling you, I love these things. Am I allowed to say that? Probably not. Click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/TroyOboyo to get 20% off your Raycon order plus free shipping. Thanks so much to Raycon for sponsoring this video, and thanks to my patrons who are able to get all my videos early and ad-free for just $1 a month, and special thanks to my patron Clyde who suggested this video in the Patreon Discord. Now, I want to clarify a little bit what I mean by the X-Men 97 treatment. I am not just talking about shows that got canceled and should come back. That video could be like 20 hours long and I'd still somehow forget to mention your favorite show. Instead, I want to focus on shows that are at least a decade old and were held back in some way, either by the age or by the animation or the studio meddling, and would benefit from a more modern continuation in the same vein as X-Men 97. Although David Zaslav does need to pay for canceling Infinity Train. But I'm also of the belief that not every single show needs to be revived. Abrupt cancellations are one thing, but there are shows that were given definitive endings with creative teams that want to move on that I still see people begging to come back. A perfect example of this being Justice League Unlimited. I loved JLU. It's my favorite of all the DC animated universe shows, if nothing less because of that version of Green Arrow. But unlike a lot of shows on this list, it was able to get a solid and definitive ending for the characters. And now without Kevin Conroy, it just wouldn't feel right to keep going from there. If the DCAU were to continue with anything, I would honestly rather a solo Wonder Woman series, since I always thought it was kind of a wasted opportunity that they didn't explore her mythos like they did with Batman and Superman. And as much as it pains me to say, because these are some of my favorite shows ever made, I kind of feel the same way about X-Men Evolution and even Teen Titans to an extent. There is more that they could do, and I love those versions of the characters, but their endings are so poignant that I don't really want to spoil that with a revival. A lot of people think that Teen Titans ended on a cliffhanger, but that ending is entirely intentional. It was a story about how when you're growing up, you have to learn to move on and accept that things aren't always going to be the same. I mean, the episode was literally called Things Change. At this point, I don't know what to tell you. We live in this very nostalgia-fueled culture where everything has to come back and get rebooted only to end up not living up to expectations. Young Justice, the show that for years was basically the show to get revived, finally got a third and even fourth season before getting canceled again, and without much to really show for it. Those seasons are fine and everything, there's some good stuff there, but like, it's nowhere near the same level. And so for any revival type of show, I would want to make sure that it would actually justify its existence outside of nostalgia and merch sales or streaming service numbers, and instead have something to say in today's age. And the first and probably the most obvious pick, I mean, I literally put him in the thumbnail, is Spider-Man the Animated Series. This show was such a classic. In the same vein as X-Men, it tried its best to take 90s comic arcs and adapt them directly as much as possible. It popularized a lot of characters that haven't gotten adapted anywhere else, and it was a really easy gateway into reading those comics. Christopher Daniel Barnes is one of my favorite voices for Peter Parker, and the show is responsible for streamlining the origin of Spider-Man's black suit to the story that we all know and love, leading to glorious moments such as, "Get back here, Shocker! Shocker!" It had a lot of limitations due to network censorship, like how Spider-Man for some reason wasn't allowed to punch anybody, because of course, Spider-Man, famous for never throwing punches. And when it was canceled, there were a ton of plot lines and threads that just never got resolved. I do really like the finale of that show, being the first ever version of Spider-Verse and having Spider-Man literally meet Stan Lee, but there was always clearly more to tell that they never got the chance to. And so if it were to come back, those ideas and threads, like what happened to Mary Jane, could finally get resolved. And on top of that, there's now so many more comic stories that they could pull from. They could stick to the 90s comics, but I think it could be really interesting to take more modern aspects like Miles Morales or Silk and bring those characters into that same 90s setting. Or go the opposite direction and really lean into stuff like the clones and Ben Reilly stories that otherwise wouldn't get screen time in another show. Now, this show, as well as a lot of other Marvel shows back in the 90s, including the original X-Men series, have always been connected in some Marvel 90s animated universe. There were a few inconsistencies leading to people saying that they weren't connected, but these characters were always very clearly intended on being the same versions. And that's a mentality that's seemingly been continued into X-Men 97, with that show featuring cameos from Captain America, Doctor Doom, Baron Zemo, and even this exact version of Spider-Man. Especially based on that little cameo, that animation was fantastic, some of the best Spidey's ever looked in a TV show. And so if they were to bring it back as like a Spider-Man 98, that could be a ton of fun to run alongside X-Men. I'm not sure what's going on with that freshman year show, which I guess changed its name to Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and maybe Disney wouldn't want two Spidey shows running at the same time, but like, I don't know, I feel like at this point, like, why not, you know? Also, unrelated, but I haven't made a Spider-Man video in 6 months, and I gotta say, my channel and my mental health has been thriving. Wait, this doesn't count, does it? The next show that I think should make a return is Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Also from Marvel, but from a different era, Avengers EMH is unquestionably my favorite version of the Avengers ever put to screen. The bar was set back in 2010, and nothing has been able to come close since. And it just goes to show how necessary of a character Janet Van Dyne is for the Avengers team and that dynamic. She's literally the glue that holds them all together, and it's absolutely insane to me that the movies have basically done nothing with her. It was even meant to tie into another great Marvel show from the same era, whose name is, for some reason, escaping me at the moment. Josh Keaton recorded voice lines and everything, but was replaced at the last minute with Drake Bell to tie into the new Ultimate Spider-Man series. God, I just can't remember the name of that show, and it's right on the tip of my tongue, you know? Despite there being multiple seasons planned with characters like Doctor Strange, the West Coast Avengers, and even the X-Men set to appear, it was canceled after season 2 and replaced with Avengers Assemble to better resemble the team of the movies. You gotta love corporate synergy. That show was fine. It was a completely normal and serviceable show, but it paled in comparison to how great EMH was. But honestly, maybe it's because they realized that it would show the world just how much better the Avengers are in this show than they were in the movies, so I could get why Disney wouldn't want that. Listen, when Captain America showed up in X-Men 97 and sided with the US military over mutant rights, all I could do was shake my head and say, my Captain America would never. Just kidding. That's how Captain America is. Any comic that's not a Captain America book, he is like the most government shill ever. But then like you start reading solo Captain America books and the dude is like Karl Marx. The next show I want to see make a return is Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Another in a long line of Scooby shows, Mystery Incorporated was unique in that it was the first in the franchise to take itself more seriously. In addition to the standard villain of the week types of stories, the show also had a long-running storyline and a greater mystery for the gang to solve. It was a little more mature than other Scooby-Doo shows, leaning into Lovecraftian horror elements, but without going completely overboard and alienating a younger audience. And above all else, it felt like it was made out of love for the original series and not out of spite, unlike a certain show that will go unnamed. Just kidding, it's Velma. I fucking hate Velma. The show ran for 2 seasons and was able to wrap up all its stories in a nice little package, serving as a semi-origin for the original series, so I don't necessarily think that it needs to come back in the form of a direct season 3, but instead to get that same creative team back and give them more freedom to tell the stories that they want to tell. For as mature as the show was, there were still a lot of restrictions from Cartoon Network that held them back a bit. Specifically Velma, nowadays her queerness is straight up canon in most versions of the character, but back then, writers kind of had to skirt around stuff and imply things between the lines despite it being their direct intention. So it would be nice to see that sort of thing talked about and explored a little bit more directly and show her relationship with Marcy some more. And with the original audience for the show having grown up, maybe the show could be able to explore even more themes and ideas with even more horror-based elements while still keeping that original vision and accessibility intact. Honestly, just like any half-decent Scooby-Doo show and I'll be happy. Anything's better than Velma, please, I'm begging you. The next show that I think should get new life is Spider-Man: The New Animated Series. The new animated series aired in 2003 on MTV of all places and starred Neil Patrick Harris as Peter Parker, who's in his freshman year of college and trying to balance that with his Spider-Man life. The show was clearly meant to tie into the Raimi movies, focusing on Peter's relationships with Harry and MJ like the movies did. Even the costume design is similar. Obviously that didn't last long since Spider-Man 2 came out a year later and completely ignored everything the show did, but still it was fun to see what felt like an alternate timeline for that world. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I'm pretty over Spider-Man being in high school, and so the college setting is always really great to see. And being on MTV, it was able to get a lot darker and more mature than a lot of other Spider-Man media. There are some genuinely pretty fucked up moments in this show, and I think that's what makes it stand out. This show is ugly. I'm sorry, that's honestly the only way I can describe it. 3D animation was really in its infancy back then, and clearly the tech just wasn't up to the task. Some shots looked cool, but most were just Whoa, yeah, okay. But now with how much animation and CGI has evolved, especially with how good X-Men 97 cell shading is able to look, I think it's a perfect opportunity to revisit this version of the character. It only ran for one season before being canceled. Despite having good ratings, it seemed like MTV just didn't want to make it anymore. It was even aired out of order, so it was basically doomed from the start. And it ended on a cliffhanger, so either another season or a spin-off movie or even just a cameo in the new Spider-Verse to tie the knot would be great. I've always been fascinated with this series. It's kind of been the forgotten stepchild of Spider-Man shows because it pales in comparison to the 90s animated series and oh God, what's the name? I can't remember for some reason. The Sensational Spider-Man? No, it's not that. But it still has a lot of its own merits, and I'd love to do a deep dive talking about it, so if that's something you'd be interested in, let me know down below. The next pick is Batman Brave and the Bold. Now, there's a plethora of Batman shows that I could have picked here. I honestly struggled to pick between this, 2005's The Batman, which I loved growing up, and 2013's Beware the Batman, which definitely fits the canceled with unresolved plotlines criteria a little bit better. But Brave and the Bold is such a special show. In an era where everything was trying to be dark and gritty and super serious, Brave and the Bold leans so much more into the sillier Silver Age direction for the Caped Crusader. Having him fight more outlandish villains, focusing more on the comedy and the adventure of it all without ever feeling like a parody or like they were ignoring the weight of the character. One of my favorite aspects of it was how it highlighted the rest of the DC universe. More or less each episode paired Batman off with another, oftentimes lesser known DC character, using the property of Batman to expand people's knowledge of the world and tell stories with characters they otherwise wouldn't get to see. This show was how a lot of people first got introduced to Jaime Reyes as Blue Beetle. And now look at him, he's got his own movie that was honestly really good. And I'm not just saying that because I met Sholo and he's legit the nicest guy ever. Now, Brave and the Bold's finale was pretty great, with Batmite canceling the show specifically because it wasn't dark and gritty enough, which is a great meta bit about the state of the character. But there were definitely plot lines that were cut short, and with the format and the showcasing of characters and how it's such a different take than 90% of other Batman media, I think it could have its place if it were to make a return. Also, I just want another Music Meister episode. Is that too much to ask for? The next show is Star Wars The Clone Wars. Wait, sorry, my bad. I mean Star Wars Clone Wars. Huge difference, don't get that twisted. Star Wars Clone Wars was a miniseries directed by Genndy Tartakovsky that released on Cartoon Network in 2003 between the release of episodes 2 and 3. Genuinely, this and Andor and the Master and Apprentice book are my favorite Star Wars things outside of the original movies. It was made non-canon to make room for the 2008 series, and I love that show, don't get me wrong, and I'm glad it got its finale and it's getting continuation with Bad Batch, but the sheer vibes and sauce of this miniseries is completely unmatched. Tartakovsky has always been a legend in the animation world. His work on projects like Samurai Jack and later Primal has some of the most unique and innovative 2D animation I've ever seen, and this miniseries was no exception. It's filled to the brim with life, with insane action set pieces that are still some of the best in the entire franchise. It had a version of General Grievous that was so cool that they literally made him a loser in everything else, and people for some reason still love the guy. Like, I swear to God, like, the only reason people were excited for episode 3 when that movie came out was because of this miniseries, and nobody gives it the credit it deserves. Especially now with modern animation technology and the merging of 2D and 3D like with X-Men 97, a revival in some way has so much potential to really be something special. Now, the other Clone Wars series basically covered all that era of Star Wars, so I'm not saying we go back to that. I'm frankly sick of the Clone Wars, but instead, I'd love to see the same team and the same treatment applied to the other time periods of the Star Wars universe. Like, imagine this animation style for the Imperial Rebellion or Luke's adventures after the original series or even the High Republic. It's one of the biggest benefits of the Star Wars franchise, the ability to tell stories that may or not be canon but still have their place and have value as a piece of art. They can make it its own thing or tie it into Star Wars Visions, which I've absolutely been loving. Either way, seeing this team and this style make a return in some way would be a huge breath of fresh air for the franchise. I know talking about Star Wars is basically like a death sentence on this app because the discourse is just a total nightmare, but I'm going to talk about Genndy's Clone Wars any chance I get. And finally, the moment you've been waiting for, a beloved animated superhero show that was canceled before its time after only 2 seasons, ending with plot threads and cliffhangers unresolved, that was given a spiritual successor in Young Justice but is just begging for a full revival, starring Josh Keaton as the title role as your favorite brown-haired superhero, and that show is Green Lantern the Animated Series. What, was there something else? I don't know what else you wanted me to say. Green Lantern the Animated Series is one of my favorite animated superhero shows ever made, and I don't think it gets the recognition that I think it deserves. It had this very Star Trek quality to it, focusing on exploring the deep reaches of the universe and the Lanterns helping whoever they meet along the way, which I think is always the best way to handle the Green Lantern mythos. I know it's not technically canon to the DCAU or anything, but it was produced by Bruce Timm, and so I've always considered it to be connected in some way. Go ahead and fight me on that Watchtower database. Josh Keaton as Hal Jordan took me a little bit to get used to after his time as Spider-Man, but I grew to really love him, and the show's depiction of Kilowog and Guy Gardner are some of the best versions of those characters. But not only that, the show introduced new and original characters to the universe like Aya and Razor, who turned out to be such great additions and have started making their way into other media like the comics and even Young Justice. I honestly think Green Lantern lore is such an untapped goldmine for stories. Not enough people give the character and that mythos the recognition it deserves because of a mediocre movie that came out 13 years ago. And this show, at the very least, is a great gateway into that side of the DC universe. Just like with the MTV Spider-Man series, 3D animation has come a long way since even 2012 when the show ended. The show certainly doesn't look bad by any means, But I think now with a modern flair, animators could make the alien planets and the space battles really something else. Honestly, I think Green Lantern is at its best in animation because you can go to different planets and meet different aliens without a concern for budget, which is why I'm kind of concerned about that live action Lanterns show because it's going to be set on Earth. If you're going to have Green Lantern on Earth, you need Green Arrow. That's honestly the only problem with this show is Green Arrow wasn't in it yet. Oh my god, if they brought it. It ended on a cliffhanger before being canceled by Cartoon Network because of poor toy sales and Ryan Reynolds. The newest season of Young Justice was able to help tie the knot a little bit, but I really think there's so much left to explore with this story. They could pull from more modern Green Lantern stories, introduce other members of the Corps like Kyle Rayner or Jon Stewart. I am the world's biggest Jessica Cruz fan and I need to see her in more things. The show was smart. It didn't throw Sinestro and the Lanterns at us right away. Instead, it chose to focus on other Lanterns and characters that were a bit lesser known while slowly building up Sinestro's relationship with Hal and setting the seeds for his betrayal. I mean, he is the most evil looking guy in the universe and his name is Sinestro. You'd think that Hal would be able to see it coming, but we all know he's not the brightest. But if they were to come back and play that right, the story has potential to be really tragic and unlike anything we've ever seen in Green Lantern media. Maybe even break the curse from the movie and make people see that Green Lantern is cool again. Now, like I said before, just bringing back a show isn't enough. I don't know about you, but I'm personally over all this nostalgia bait, remember the thing type of reboots. And we instead have to think about why a show like X-Men 97 is as good as it is. Because I'll be totally honest with you all, this show could have been terrible. I didn't grow up with the original series, so I was never attached to it, and I fully expected this to be exactly the same kind of nostalgia trap meant to sell merchandise to 35-year-olds that we've seen a million times before. I went into it wishing this was X-Men Evolution, cynical and jaded from being disappointed so many times, with my expectations frankly on the floor. But within the first 30 seconds, I was absolutely in love. And that's not because it was a reboot, it's not because of the nostalgia or anything like that, it's because this is a show that so clearly loves everything X-Men and is made by people who all have that same love. Now, right before the show premiered, Marvel fired the show's executive producer for reasons that we don't know, and I'm not going to speculate on why or if that was the correct choice or not, because the fact is we just don't have the information to make that call. And I only bring this up because a lot of people have placed the success of the show on just the one person, when in reality it's a team effort. The show is made by dozens and dozens of incredibly talented people and writers and animators. It sounds like I'm saying writers and animators aren't people. I'm not David Zaslav. Dozens and dozens of incredibly talented writers and animators and voice actors who were all brimming with love and passion for the X-Men. And that love seeps into everything about the show, from the stories to the characters to the animation and the action sequences. It loves everything about the characters and the franchise. It understands why the source material was so special and takes real-world social issues and nuanced topics and applies them to the mutant metaphor. But at the same time, it's not afraid to take risks and do things that other shows might be afraid to do. It was willing to look at the things that worked for the original series, but also the things that didn't, and was willing to improve upon them. It's not some safe, easy to digest, silly superhero show that you're supposed to turn your brain off while watching to distract you from the real world. Honestly, given the state of the industry and the state of the genre, with so much superhero media seemingly not willing to take these kinds of big swings, it's kind of a miracle that this show even exists. It's not afraid to portray its characters as flawed, with messy personal drama that's right out of a trashy soap opera. There are big, grand speeches aimed directly at the people in power and apply to real-life current events. Huge fan-favorite characters are killed off, and we're not afraid to deal with the repercussions of that. It's everything that an X-Men show should be. And if any other show were to get rebooted, to get brought back from the dead and given a new life in this modern era of animation and storytelling, this is the new blueprint. And I, for one, think that's spectacular. Spectacular. Oh my god, that's it. Yeah, also bring back Spectacular Spider-Man. I can't believe I almost forgot that. That's crazy. But what do you think of X-Men 97, and what shows do you want to see get that same kind of revival? I know there are a lot of them, and I probably missed your favorite, so let me know down in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to let the YouTube algorithm know and hit the like button and subscribe. Special thanks to Anns, Cabbage Boy, Cassidy, Carol Ann Brenneman, Chicken McDoofus, Cook C, Cosmic Tragedy, Danny Boy, Deco PY, Dreamer Who, Eden Kenna, Egan McFarlane, Fastest Man Dead, Hannah C, Howard Bell, Iron Ninja, Jake Selig, Jumpman Morrow, Corey's Not Fresh, Glassbear Productions, Murren09, Popcorn Eater 123, Spectacular Clyde, TDW Fan, Theo Crouch, Tim Neufeld, Trans Huntress, Troy by Razor's Lame, Tyler Goodrich, and Yash Kapoor for being spectacular fanboys on my Patreon. This has been Troy Boy 17 coming at you live. Be responsible, and I'll see you around.